Hello everyone, welcome back again to another tutorial. For this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to cut a bustier for someone with very big boobs, and we'll be using the divided by 2 method. You can use this method for anybody, but if you're sewing for plus size, this is the best method. This method supersedes the divided by 4 method in fit. With this method, you will get the best fit with little or no adjustments needed. Please note that this method is an advanced method used by professionals. Before you be able to apply this, you need to have knowledge of your divided by 4 before jumping into this. The difference between this method and the divided by 4 method is that for the divided by 4, you divide the circumference of the bust, the waist and the hip by 4, meaning that you are treating the front and the back as equal parts. But in this method, you are treating them differently. You are acknowledging the fact that for the bust, the front bust is always more than the back because of the presence of the bust. For the waist, the front waist is always more than the back because of the presence of the stomach. And for the hip, the back hip is always more than the front because of the presence of the bum bum. So I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to take measurements for divided by 2. But for the purpose of this tutorial, I'll just be showing you this formula which you can use if you're not able to measure your clients. So this is the measurements I'll be using to draft these bodies, and as you can see, I was able to measure the front and back dimensions of the bust, waist and hip. So I'll start by rolling a line to mark the beginning of my pattern, and I'm cutting this unfolded. So first I'll mark her shoulder slant of 1.5, her across front length of 5 inches, her chest length of 10.5, her bust point of 14 inches, her under bust of 18 inches, and her hip length of 29 inches. So after that, I'm just going to roll all my lines, and I'm also going to label them. So because this will be a shoulder dart bustier, I'm going to be starting the measurement from her chest, and we'll be using only the front width for this to make the front pattern. So I'll be marking her front bust width dimension divided by 2 on her chest line, and don't forget her front bust width is 32 inches, so 32 inches divided by 2, that's 16. So I've marked it on the chest and on the bust. So on her hip part, we are going to be putting her front hip measurement divided by 2, and her front hip is 27 inches. So that divided by 2 is 13.5. So I'm just going to connect the chest to the bust and then the bust to the hip. So this is how her front shape actually is. You can see she's really busted. That is why the bust part is really bigger than the hip. Next, I'll be marking her nipple to nipple measurement. So her nipple to nipple is 12 inches. So I'm going to divide that by 2, which is 6 inches. So I just marked that on the bust and on the hip line, and I'm going to connect that using a straight line. Next, I'm going to mark her front waist width on her waist measurement. So her front waist width is 26 inches, so divided by 2, that's 13 inches. So I'm going to measure what I have left, and I have 1.75. So I'm just going to mark 1 for the side, and the remaining 3/4 I'm going to share it in between my nipple line in the ratio of half and quarter. So one side should be bigger than the other. The side that should be bigger should be the one towards this side. So I'm just going to connect my waist to my hip using the curve ruler, and then I'm going to connect the waist to the chest. So now this is her main body measurement. So on the under bust, I'm going to mark her under bust measurement, which is 48, and I'll be dividing that by 4. That is 12 inches. So I'm just going to mark that. So I decided to use an orange marker to retrace the line so that it looks different from the main line. So this is her new body. So now I'm going to measure what I have left from that under bust point to her main body, which I've just marked. And I have 2 and 3/4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share that in between the nipple line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 1 3/4 on the side towards the side seam, and then I'm going to mark 1 inch towards the center front. So I'm just going to connect the under bust to the waist, and then I'm going to mark 4 inches above her hip line and then continue the line. So this stands like her stomach line. So after that, now we are going to be drawing our bust curve. So from her nipple, from her bust line, I'm going to mark 1.5 inch and then use this curve ruler to connect this. So I'm using this to form the bust. So after that, let's move to the shoulder dart. So from the shoulder dart, I'm going to start by marking her neck width of 3.5 inches. And from this point, I'm just going to connect it to her bust point using a straight line. After that, I'm going to be marking 5 inches from that her neck width. So I'm using 5 inches for our shoulder dart spacing because she has very big boobs. Okay, so and I'm going to connect that point to 1.5 inch above the line drawn earlier, like this. So now I'm going to fine tune this so that it can give us a nice curve. Okay, so I'm going to redraw the line so that it gives us curves at both sides so that our bust cup will form very well. So and this part will be going off. So after that, now I'm just going to be drawing our sweetheart because this is going to be a sweetheart. So I'm marking how deep she wants the sweet neck part to be, which is 10 inches. And then I just want to mark her across front width so that it's going to help me to draw the armhole. So I'm just trying to get a armhole curve and I've just marked 8 inches. And that is how high the sweetheart will be and how low it's going to be, it's 10 inches. So I'm just going to connect that to her chest length and then I'm going to use my curve to try and get the best curve I can get. So the curve isn't going to be very deep because it's just 2 inches. So I'm just going to measure this line and make sure that it is the same thing with the other line before drawing the sweetheart of this side. So I'm just going to keep fine-tuning this until I get a nice curve. Now I can go ahead and cut out our pattern. So if you want, I'm going to also snatch the waist of this corset bustier. So if you want to know how I snatched the waist, fixed the boning, and I'll be using steel boning for this, how I also fixed the eyelets, attached it to the dress, and so on. Just make sure you turn on your notification so you don't miss any of our videos. Now I'm just going to mark 1 inch above our hip line and I'm going to cut that out. So this is how it looks. So the final step I'm going to do is I'm going to be marking 1/2 inch on both sides of our pattern like this. I'm doing this in order to avoid or to reduce or to pinch the top side so that it laps well on the body so you won't have excess opening and thereby more boobs popping out. Okay, so this is optional but it's for better fitting. So I'm just going to cut this out and that is all. Our pattern, front pattern is ready. So now let's get to the back. For the back, I'm going to start by running a line, and because this is a tube dress, that line is going to automatically be her chest line of 10.5. So next, I'm going to mark her bust point of 14, her back waist length of 18, the front waist length of 21, and her hip length of 29. And I'm going to row and label this. So as you can see, on this back pattern, I actually marked both her front and her back waist lengths. So you're just going to be seeing how I will incorporate both to get a perfect fit for the back. So next, I'm going to mark 1 inch from on her chest line, and I'm also going to mark that same 1 inch on her back waist length, which is 18 inches, and I'm going to connect this line. So what we are trying to do is that we are trying to create a butt curve at the back for her. So while on our hip line, I'm going to mark 4 inches upward and then use the curved part of my ruler to connect it. So we'll actually be cutting this part off. So you can see we already have a nice shape at the back. Next, I'll mark her back bust width of 24 inches divided by 2, that's 12 inches. So I've marked that on her chest and on her bust. And then on her hip, I'll mark her back width measurement of 27 divided by 2, that's 13 and a half. So I'm just going to connect that as you're seeing, just like we did at the front. So to draft the back, we'll be using the back dimensions, while for the front, you use the front dimensions. So now for the back waist, I'm just going to draw a line to connect the front waist length to the back waist length like this. And on this line, I'm going to be measuring her back waist width, which is 21 inches divided by 2, 10 and a half. So I'm just going to mark that. And after marking the 10 and a half, I'm going to mark an extra 1 inch for our dart. So whatever is remaining is going to go to the side. Now I'm just going to connect the bust to that 1 inch for our dart, and then from that point to the hip. To draw our back dart, I'm going to mark our across back width divided by 4. That's 18 divided by 4, that's 4 and a half. So I'm going to mark that on the chest line, and on the hip line, I'm going to mark the middle point of the hip, which is 6 and 3/4. So I'm just going to connect both points together. So you can see that our dart is quite slanty. So I actually prefer my dart this way, but you can make yours straight if you want. So next, to put our dart, I'm going to mark our dart on our back waist length. So I've just marked our half inch. The dart is going to stop 4 inches above our hip line. So I'm going to mark that point, and then it's going to start from the bust also. So I'm going to connect from the bust to the waist dart, and then from the waist dart to the 4 inches above the hip. And then I'm just going to mark 1 inch cut out from the hip side like I did at the front. And then finally, I'm going to decide how I want the back to be. So I just want it to be a bit deeper than it is. So I'm just going to make it 12 inches, and then I'm going to curve that. And then I'm just going to cut this out. So this is your back bodice. It's very easy, and this method, trust me, gives the best results. So for the zip allowance, you can see that part I cut out. So when you're cutting out your fabric for the zip allowance, all you need to do is just to add your 1 inch or half inch for your zip. So I'm just going to label this also because they look quite confusing, so that I don't take the up as the bottom or the start side at the main side. So I'm just going to label that down, and that is all. So guys, I want to know your take on this method. Will you be trying it? If you've tried it, how did it turn out? If you have any question, please don't hesitate to drop it in the description box. I also offer detailed tutorial on this method. So if you want to know more, also send me a message. And please don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. Bye! And watch out for the next part.